Resource person of today's session, Dr. Persras Hulisa, coordinator of the program, Dr. A.P. Hurekar sir, co-coordinator, Mr. D.S. Sonone sir, all the participants, I wish all of you a very good morning. We have a distinguished resource person with us. Hulisa, welcome back to VPKB IIT Baramati sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting.
Yes, sir. Let me introduce Basaraj Hulisa. Mr. Basaraj Huli is a strong technology professional and a telecom domain specialist with more than 30 years of diverse experience in industry, startups, and entrepreneurship and research. His company, Oft A IoT Private Limited, field of accelerating digital convergence using cognitive networks IoT framework. He is a part of CDAC team that is working in the area of emerging technologies and e-governance standards. He is trained by UC Berkeley's Haas School of Business on entrepreneurship and design thinking. He conducts design thinking programs to corporates and colleges during his free time. He is a managing director of A IoT Private Limited. He is the founder director of Graceful Growth Consulting India Private Limited. He is also the consultant of CTAC, that is Center for Development and Advanced Computing, which is scientific society of the Ministry of Communication and Information Technology, Government of India. So we have such a distinguished resource person, as I just mentioned before. So, Hulisa, I request you to guide all the participants, to guide all of us with your wisdom, sir. I
Thank you,
request.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. So can I share my screen?
Yes, sir, you can.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, visible, sir. Visible.
It's visible. Okay. Okay. And I'm audible also?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, because it is important that we should be audible and plus the screen should be visible, right?
Okay, sir.
That's the technology. So we trust technology, and many a times technology also has certain problems. So we as engineers are responsible for it. So I think we'll have to manage knowing what we have created and then how it can be used. Okay, so thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. It is always pleasure talking to the faculty. It is always pleasure talking to your college, because I had been to your college, and then we had some good 1 week program then. So I have very good memories of that. And now today, when Hurekar sir said that he wants me to talk something, I said great. I don't want to miss any opportunity talking to the people like you. So yeah, with that, let me start off. I'm going to be talking about something called as learning experience design. Actually, it's a part of design thinking. And mostly what I have done is, I have kind of conducted something like 4 to 5 days program on experience design and learning experience design for various colleges. I'm just trying to give an introduction or a gist of what was the program that was conducted. So it is just going to be a gist, and then we'll have to see how much justice can be done in 1.5 hours. But however, if I can actually put that thought in you, I think I would have done my job. So what we will also do is, after every 10 to 15 minutes, I'll pause for some time so that, in case if there are any queries, we could sort them out. So what I request is, please, you keep your questions till we pause after about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we can have a discussion on that. The reason why I'm doing it that way is because many a times the questions that we have get sorted out in the process of the presentation itself. So, in case if there are queries and if they get unresolved, then we have this time where we can actually discuss. Yeah. So I'm going to be talking about what is called as learning experience design. So I will talk about what do we really mean by learning experience. It's all about experiencing the learning. So I will kind of elaborate on that. And then, of course, the picture also shows, what I'm trying to actually talk about. So my whole program is actually divided into these 2-3 parts. First thing is that I'm going to be setting up the context and then talking about what learning experience design is all about. And why are we talking about it today? In order to explain why we are talking about it today, I talk about what is called as an experience economy, which is today's need. And I'll also in the process talk about how technology is disrupting, and the pandemics are pulling us into what is called as a new normal. So this is how we will set up a context. And then we will talk about, in the context of this new normal, how we need to transform ourselves by adapting technology. And, we cannot just say that, okay, we want to transform, but you need to have a complete mindful approach towards that. So I'll briefly touch upon that. And then, when we talk about the mindful approach for transformation, we will have to be, it's a transformation project. So the project, it's a large project, and this large project will essentially will have multiple, problems. So how do we understand what those problems are? And in the process of understanding what the problems are, I'll touch upon something called as innovation in the problem domain itself. Because, given a problem, we know how to solve the problem. But, where we have missed all throughout in our curriculum and career and all that is, we don't try to innovate the problem itself. We presume that the problem is there, and then, we get on to solving it. But we don't try to check if that is the right problem to solve. So I will explain that with certain examples. And then, when it is not the right problem, can the problem be reframed? So that is what we will be briefly touching upon. And in order to reframe, you need to have certain, mindsets and attributes. So that is what we will briefly touch. And then OptIoT is a company that we are, we have just started, where, we are trying to help organizations in a digital transformation. So, if time permits, I'll briefly, take a minute or two to talk about it, and then we will also have, in case if you have questions, then we could sort them out. And also, more importantly, it is going to be just an introduction. So, if you have more queries, then I would be more than happy to, connect with you and then sort them out even offline. Okay, so that is what we would do. So the takeaway is going to be how we can use mindful principles for any transformation projects, because what we are talking about today is a transformation. What we are talking about today is an transformation of education. What we are talking about today is transformation of an educational ecosystem. So how do we, do that? How do we see that? How do we look at that in a right perspective? Is what is going to be a kind of takeaway. Okay, so that is what we will try and do. Yeah, so you might have, there was a recent news saying that Byju's acquired Akash for $1 billion, valuation. So, meaning Akash was just a training institute, and somebody paying something like $1 billion. It was something which was actually talked about, so which means, what we should be happy about is, education technology or education industry, or what we call it as an edutech industry is growing. It's a good news for all of us. So try to look at that. That is one. And another important thing is that, if you really look at it in a different perspective, see, Byju started as some kind of creating some videos for the children so that the children can learn. And then soon they realized that just by giving the videos, the children may not learn. So they wanted to create some kind of an ecosystem. They also realized that the learning doesn't happen by just looking at the videos. So then they started, if you have seen the advertisements of late of Byju's, they talk about what is called as, partners in home and all that, right? So the parents becoming partners, and, you see all that. Now, if you try to understand why is that, that is basically because, in the kind of environment that we are in today, it is important that the children have to have, some other people with whom they can learn. So it is kind of building an ecosystem. So then they started talking about ecosystems, and they started, meaning in the process of building that ecosystem, they started talking about partners. So, there is a partner learning in the sense, they have to learn with somebody else. And if you have seen certain advertisements, a child is, actually explaining to some other child. Right. So all that, it's because what is important is that can we create the same experience that we had in the classrooms onto what is called as a digital world or a cyber world. So it's kind of trying to recreate the same experiences. Now, if that cannot be done, at least attempt towards that. So why was Akash acquired? Because it was realized that not just online can help. You need to go ahead and then do something else. So it is a process of building that ecosystem. So soon what will happen is you will have what is called as the cyber universities, and children will learn at the time that they want, in the way they want, with the people that they want to learn with. And creating the kind of every experiences that possibly they would have had while in the classroom, so creating all that stuff. And then what happens is the universities then become possibly universities will either have to adapt to this change or transform to this particular change, or possibly they will just become the certification authorities, like saying that, oh, okay, this somebody has studied, and then they give an exam in some university, and then they would be certified as BE, BTech or something like that. So I think if you read the new education policy, there is an attempt, possibly an attempt towards this as well. So start thinking about it. My idea here is, you are all experts and you are all in the field. So you would know better. My job is only to actually create that kind of curiosity and the questions in you, so that you can start thinking about it. Okay, so that is where we are in. So now, what is this learning experience design? Okay, learning experience design, when you really talk about it, is actually creating. It is a science and art of creating that experience. So when I gave this Byju's example, it is actually a learning experience design, which will help learners to fulfill the learning outcomes that they desire in a user-centered or goal-directed way. So what I mean is, it is not the staff or the faculty-centric or the teacher-centric. It will be a student-centric, and to achieve the goals that the student would like to achieve. You are not going to be dictating, saying that, oh, okay, if you do these things, then you get a BE degree. So which means that the goal has been defined by you, right? So now, the goals will be defined by the learner himself or herself. So how can that be done? Is that the direction in which the education is going? That is something which I would leave it to you to think about. So now, if you want to do that, it is more about integrating our design thinking philosophies into it. So it's all about integrating the design thinking techniques with the instructional design. So when you design this instruction, when you have this instructional design, then you have a design thinking approach. I'm not going to be touching upon design thinking. In case if somebody gets interested in design thinking, then maybe we could have some other programs to talk about design thinking in education. Okay, which is what I have done for several institutes. So that could be done. But right now, I am just pushing these words just for you to note them down, and then you can always Google. You can always Google, and then you will get a lot of information on that. And then you will also get an information about where the edutech industry is moving towards. So now, let me talk about an experience economy. So let me just tell you about what do we really mean by an experience economy, right? So in order to explain this experience economy, if you really see, in the agriculture economy or in the agriculture age, there were coffee beans which were being sold. So we used to sell what are called as there was no coffee powder. That time there used to be coffee beans which were sold in the agriculture economy. Then when the industrial economy came, it was the coffee powder that started getting produced. Industrially produced coffee powder, and the coffee powder was being sold in the industrial economy. Then came what is called as a service economy. So in the service economy, it was the coffee which was sold. So we sell there used to be, then we started these Udupi hotels and all that who were selling coffee. So it was more of a service, right? So it was service economy. Then from the service, we have now moved to what is called as experience. Now take an example of Cafe Coffee Day. Now Cafe Coffee Day doesn't sell coffee. It sells the whole ecosystem. It sells the whole environment. The coffee is being sold for something like 120, 130 or even 200 bucks. Now, why do you pay 200 rupees to have a coffee in Cafe Coffee Day, whereas in Udupi Hotel, where the coffee is much better, you would just probably get it for, say, 20, 25 rupees. So now you don't pay 200 rupees just for the coffee, but you paid for the entire experience. Now, that experience, when you really talk about, what is happening is, it is meant for the youngsters to hang out. If you go to a Udupi hotel, you cannot sit for a long there. But if you go to a Cafe Coffee Day, you can sit as much as you want. Or if you are a business person, and if you want to have some business meetings, go and sit in Cafe Coffee Day. You get a free Wi-Fi access. Then you do your work. Just order for a coffee. Take a coffee. Call people. Have meetings. Have another coffee. So it's an environment. So what is being sold is, there is a tagline of Cafe Coffee Day which says a lot can happen over the coffee, and what you are paying for is for that. So that is how we are moving towards an experience economy. Now, if you really look at it, in education, we are moving from what is called as education as a service to learning experience. So, in the sense, even now, we are into what is called as in education, we are still into what is called as education as a service. So we always say that, educational services, right? So, what we are trying to provide is an educational service. So now, it is no more a service. It is an experience that you need to design, and you need to actually provide that new value. So how do you design, or how do you build that what is called as a learning experience, which I started talking with respect to Byju's, right? So it's a learning experience. How do you build that? You start thinking about for your own educational setup. How are you building it? Are you building it? Have you started thinking about it? Or are you still in the same, because we are also biased towards the existing system that we cannot think beyond that. So can we think beyond that? Can we think out of that box? So that is what I am trying to talk about. And if you want to think beyond that, at least you should have or inculcate 2 habits of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. People who have not read, please go through this particular book. And people who have read it, I'm talking about 2 things over here. You need to actually inculcate these 2 habits in order to start thinking about what is called as learning experience. That is, begin with the end in mind. What is that you want to create? What is the end state that you want to have? How do you want to have an ecosystem, a learning ecosystem? How do you want to create that, experience? So have that vision. So start with that vision. So begin with the end in mind. And then, the other thing is that seek first to understand, then to be understood. What it means is, you don't design, what you think is right. You don't have to, you don't solve your own problems. You solve the problem of the customer, or you solve the problem of the student, or you want to solve the problem of a learner. So think from the learner's point of view. Seek first to understand what the learner is looking for, rather than you trying to push what you think is right for them. Because this is what we have been doing. We try to push what we think is right. Like suddenly we went online. We said, okay, because we want to kind of tick mark our responsibility. That is, okay, we are supposed to be conducting or completing a syllabus, and then that needs to be completed in say 30 hours. So I need to have 30-hour session. So if I conduct 30 hours of online teaching, close. So which means that I have solved my problem. I ticked off my requirement. So what we do is we only try to solve our problems. We don't try to solve the problem of the person for whom we should be solving. Like in this case, the student. In this case, the learner. So learn to understand the learner first. So seek first to understand the learner, than to be understood. Don't try to push. Don't try to tell that what you think, they have to understand. It is first understand what, is an expectation from their end. And only then you would be able to start thinking about what is called as a learning experience, or designing that experience design. Okay. So now, see, what is important is this. So let me wait. Let me pause for a minute, and then in case if there are any queries as far as this learning experience is concerned, please you could actually either put that query, or you could ask me, or if you want to put it on a chat, you could do that as well. Eureka, sir, in case if it is on the chat, please let me know.
So they can chat or can unmute and speak also, no problem.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, sir, yes.
Sir, I got one query, sir, actually.
Yeah, please.
Sir, when we talk about the learner, every learner has got its own sort of, say, requirement. So how to customize the learning experience for the learner? Should we have the totality approach, or we have to customize our learning experience to suit the individual learner?
See, always these transformation projects, when we talk about a transformation project, it is always incremental. Okay, so it is always incremental, which means that it has to be built in stages. So that is where I gave example of this BYJU'S. Right. So now what is important here is that, it is not that, you get the requirements from the customer or the student or the learner. It is about understanding what they want. So, in design thinking philosophy, we call it as ethnographic study. So we have to study their, mindset. We have to study their psychology, and we also have to understand from them, through interviews and other things. Right. So it's a job by itself, where it's not that you go and ask them what they want, Because if you go and ask them what they want, they might not know what they want. Right. So then you have to get into a different model or a different process of getting what they want. So that's a different thing. And then maybe in case if you're interested, you could study something called as, or read something called as ethnographic study. Or, you could look at the empathy part of design thinking. So then I'm sure you will have a lot of ideas on that.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Huli sir.
Yeah.
Sir, it is really interesting that you started your session with talking about positive, about education. Yeah, it was really fascinating actually. And you talked about the evolvement, how it evolved, right? Evolvement of the education system. Sir, and you gave the example of BYJU'S also. Sir, of course, if there are such systems, such industry which are evolving, making progress, so that should be for the benefit of the common people.
Yes.
We need, because we think that we always think of the common people.
Yes.
But when it comes to BYJU'S, right? Common people are not able to touch it. They cannot afford. So we do not have the government, the industry, the people who are in the authority do not have the control and make it affordable for the common people. So only the people who have something, right, good amount of money can purchase them. They have to subscribe them with 40,000 rupees, 1 lakh rupees, and they can afford the education only.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
So what is your take on this? Please,
yes. Yeah. Yes.
What is the government doing?
Yes.
Yeah. What is the government doing? If something is good happening in education, what is the government doing?
Sir, what are we doing? Let's forget what the government is doing. What are we doing? Because we are the educationists. We are all teachers, right? So we are in an educational field. What are we doing? Yes. See, yes, BYJU'S, meaning I am not kind of promoting them. In fact, I don't like them. Okay, just for your information. But the thing is this: they are giving some direction. So they are giving some direction, and then I think we as educationists, see, you have a complete setup. Your institute is I think it's an autonomous institute, right? So why don't you create an ecosystem for yourselves? Why can't you build it? So you need to build that. You need to build that yourselves. You can possibly take help of some consultants, the digital consultants. You could do that. So please, what is that we can do? I think when we talk about 7 habits, we talk about circle of influence and circle of concern. So I think we should start looking at circle of influence. What is that we can influence? Because we are very powerful. You as teachers are very powerful. So what is that you can influence? So try and look from that point of view. I think there is a lot that we can do. And there are free softwares which are available, which we can start adapting. See, we are now looking at Zoom, right? So Zoom is one of the things. Likewise, there are several. This is only for your online teaching, but there are several tools from Google, which will help you in interactive kind of creating an interactive sessions. And then you have whiteboards. You have you could conduct quizzes and you could conduct assessments, and a lot of things. A lot of tools are available. It is more about how we can look at all these tools and then integrate them in order to create an ecosystem. So it's up to us to start thinking about it. And when you start thinking about it, you start realizing that there are so many opportunities for us now. And edutech industry is a big industry. So did I answer your question?
Yes, sir. Partly, of course, sir.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe we can talk offline. So
sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So continuing with if you really see the technology is coming up, we are having the technology. It is more about how do we use this technology? How do you adapt this technology? So, if you really look at, there's something called as Fangman. Fangman is Facebook, Apple, Netflix, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Nvidia. So this is a group, and then their market cap is almost is close to 7.6 trillion, and Apple's itself is 2 trillion. So the market cap of these Fangman or these technology companies is equal to the combined GDP of Japan and India together. So why I'm representing this is because the technology is eating the world today. It's all about technology. It's all about technology, and then we have to start adapting the technology. We have to start seeing how we can use this, into our own day-to-day lives, to change our own lives. So what it also means is that we are transforming from what is called as material-based economy into a knowledge-based economy. So we are talking about what is called as knowledge-based economy today. Just for example, I think about a couple of years back, Flipkart, when it was being sold, its market cap was much higher than Tata Steel. So now, what did Flipkart have other than just some servers and some cloud services, whereas Tata Steel had an entire city. But still, the market capitalization of Flipkart was much higher than Tata Steel. Now, what it meant was that we are now shifting towards what is called as knowledge-based economy. So what sells today is a knowledge. So it's all about knowledge. What is being valued is knowledge. Okay, so that is how the transformation is happening. So if you start looking from this perspective, it's all the thoughts that I'm giving you. Now, let me get you on to what is called a story of demonetization. I like to talk about stories, and then I want to talk about how the technology is transforming the way we live. Not just the technology, but also the pandemics, or for that matter, the political policies. All these are actually changing the way we start looking at things. So just to give you an example of how the political decisions also change the way we behave is this story of demonetization. Now, when the demonetization was announced, by Narendra Modi, I think a few years back. See, what happened was, forget about what was the reason, and then what was the purpose, and then were there any political advantages that somebody wanted to take, or forget all that. But purely look at it from what it has done to the technology. Now, when demonetization happened, it had a lot of impact on what is called as digital payments. So the debit cards, use of debit cards, credit cards increased, and mobile wallets, the mobile payments, increased. Then point of sale devices started coming, and then then there was a standardization. So the biggest beneficiary of all this was the digitization of the payments, the entire payment system. So you had standards also. That is, you had UPI, you had Bharat QR, and so a lot of standards started coming up. Now, see, if you really look at it, this is one part of the story. But yes, demonetization happened, but post demonetization, there was cash. But still, people started paying by the mobiles. So nowadays, even the sabji wala will have, you can pay with your mobile phone, right? So you could phone pay or Google Pay and all that have started becoming very popular. And then, so which essentially means that there is a behavioral change because of the political decision or a political decision that took place, or the policy change that happened, and so on, right? So now how that has an impact on the way the technology gets developed. So let us look at let us look at how those things, these kind of scenarios the political policies or, the pandemics and all that, how they affect the technology adaptation cycle as well. Now, if you really see the way any technology gets adapted, like for example, digitalization, right? The way the technology gets adapted is this way. That is, initially there will be about 2.5% of people who are innovators. So, there will be very few people who will be using that. And then there are some early adapters, which is about 13.5%. Then there will be a dip. There will be a chasm. Now that chasm, unless you, jump over that, you won't be able to reach the early majority. So this chasm, if you want to overcome this, many a times what happens is the technology is so good that the chasm will close by itself, or many a times, these kind of political decisions or the pandemics, like coronavirus today, has closed this. So now you want to have the digitalization, or you want to have this online teaching and all that, which existed earlier also. You could have done earlier also, but now you have been pushed to do that. Now, when you are pushed to do that, then you start quickly adapting, and this chasm will just vanish. And then you have late majorities, which is 34%, and you have the logarithms. Okay, so this is how the technology adoption takes place. So now what I'm trying to talk about here is that, yes, it is the political decisions or the pandemics. I'm coming to the pandemic now. So it is because of these pandemics, you will be forced to, start adapting the technologies. So now, because of the pandemic, we have got into what is called as low-touch economy. So the colleges also have to now start reshaping themselves. There will be a new normal. So how do you really start looking at the new normal? So that is something which you will have to start looking at. And most importantly, the future will always be shaped by the current crisis. The future, which is going to be a kind of a digital world, so we don't want to meet people physically today. We want to meet people virtually, so we have virtual parties of late, so why? Because, it's because of the current crisis. So which means that, that will change the behavior of the people. So the change in the behavior of the people will get us into what is called as a new normal. So we will get into a new normal, and the new normal would be slightly different from what is to be a normal, say 2 years back. So 2 years back, inviting the guests at home, that was a normal, right? Now, I'm not sure when it, whether it will happen anytime, at least in the near future, right? So there is going to be a new normal, a new way of behavior. And then see, forget us, because, we would have seen something and then we would like to, get back to that. But think about the children who would not have seen that way. So for them, the normal will be a very different thing. So things are going to be changing, and the future is all going to be shaped by the current crisis. So now this, this whole thing is now shifting us into what is called as believing in the data, than on our guts. See, we are shifting towards what is called as humanism to dataism. We don't believe our own guts. We start believing in the data. For example, today, the pandemic, we continuously keep looking at how many number of cases have increased, how many deaths were there. So, we start looking at the data, and then, and then our own reaction is based on that data. So our own emotions, whatever emotions that we have, either the positive or the negative emotions that get released, they are all dictated by the data now. So that is what is the shift that is happening. So now it is very important for us to start thinking about it. Are we being driven by the data, or are we being driven by our own emotions? So it is something which we'll have to start thinking about it. And then sooner or later, we are going to be shifting into, being driven by our emotions, so being driven by the data. Let me give you an example. See, I am sure you would have used, you would have in your cars, you would have had the navigation and all that, So if you want to reach a certain place, you start the navigator, and then the directions are shown, and then you use that navigation or the Google Maps in order to reach a certain place, right? So that is what you do. Now, just think about it. Think about that. You are from a certain place like Pune, and then every day I reach, from home to office, taking the same road. I don't change that road because many a times I feel that see, it's like it is in my back of my mind, and then my car understands that road, so I travel the same route. So that is what keeps happening. And then I also have, because of the new cars, I also have the Google Maps and the navigator in my car. So one fine day, what happens is I have switched on my navigator, and the navigator is trying to tell me that I should not take that particular road. So it says that it should not take that road, and then because I believe that road always, I've been traveling by that road. I go on my gut. And when I go on my gut, suddenly I realize that there is a new road construction or some road repair that is happening. So then then I realize that Google was telling me right. So now if that happens a few times, if it happens 2 or 3 times, then suddenly I start believing Google than believing myself. So I stop believing my guts, and I start believing Google. Right? So that is what happens. And when that happens, what is happening is all our decisions are going to be based on the data, and they are not going to be based on the gut. And that is happening today. Like, for example, if you go to the hospital today, the doctor earlier, I'm sure when you were young, and then if you're going to a doctor, say about 20, 30 years back, the doctor used to know you. He used to have some kind of a clinical test, and then based on that, he used to understand what problems you have. Right? So this was about 20, 30 years back. Now, if you go to a doctor will give you certain tests. He will say that you will have to do this 10, 15 tests. So which means that the doctor doesn't believe in his own feelings or in his own guts. He wants to see what the data is trying to tell, and then based on that data he wants to give the treatment. So what we say is we are moving from what is called as humanism, which was the decisions were based on the emotions, into what is called as dataism. So all the decisions are based on the data and no more the humanism. So the power center is shifting from human feelings to algorithms. So what is happening today is, the power center is shifting from the feelings or our emotions into algorithms. So it's all algorithms which are going to be dictating tomorrow. Okay, so that is what is the shift. Now we have to understand that shift, because if you want to build something for tomorrow, we have to understand what is going to be there tomorrow, right? So this particular slide I have taken from a book called as Homo Deus. Okay, so it's a good book, Homo Deus. It says it's a brief history of tomorrow, written by a person called Yuval Noah Harari. You could read this book. He is a historian, so his viewpoints. It's not necessary that you should believe those viewpoints, but at least it gives a perspective, which makes you to think. So that's how the shift is going to be. Okay, so that's what is going to be a shift. Yeah. So let me just pause for a minute and then ask you: is there any query in this? Okay, so let me quickly, because we are still in the context, so let me quickly cover the other parts. See, we need to talk about what is called as a learning transfer model. No, it is also referred to as learning transfer mental model. So, how learning happens, basically you start with, creating certain concepts, and then you those concepts in order to solve a specific problem. And then, start applying that into a new or a new situation or a new environment. So, when you talk about a knowledge is all about accumulating all those concepts. Like, for example, if you learn a lot of theorems or formulas of mathematics, then you have a lot of knowledge about those theorems and formulas, and that you know them by heart. Now, when a specific problem on that is given, then you will be able to connect them, and then you will be able to give a solution. So basically, those concepts get connected, and then when you connect them, or when you build a relationship between those concepts, then you are getting an answer. So intelligence is about how do you connect those concepts in order to solve a specific problem. But most important is, yes, when a problem is given, you are able to solve. But what is important is that, how do you apply that into any new situation when it becomes a first time situation? So how do you apply that? So that is what is an experience. So, are we doing all these things when we talk about an educational, system today? Yes, possibly to some extent, yes. But, with the kind of, online teaching that we are talking about, to what extent and to what level we are doing this. So it becomes important and critical for us to start looking at, how are we actually providing an environment by which a student, not only establishes the relationship when a problem is given, but, how does he understand the new situations and then see, what kind of, relationships between the concepts that he has learned could be adapted or should be, used. So that is what is going to be critical. Now, how do you build this? How do you build this very specific thing? That is what is going to be a critical as far as this, learning ecosystem is concerned, or a transfer model is concerned. So I just want you people to start thinking about these things. So, which means that going forward, the learning is going to be contextual and it will be personalized. The learning is going to be all contextualized. It will be contextualized and it will be personalized. So, today, if you really see, it is the same teacher, who will, understand whatever he wants to from certain, references. And then the contents are with the teacher, and then he knows how to deliver that, and then he goes and delivers it, and the student consumes it, and then the staff does an assessment. Now, all these things, we look at it as one single thing. Now, instead, can you separate them? So when you separate them, then you start getting certain new ideas. So contents, from where it all can come. Should it just be from the head of a teacher, or should it be from various other things? That is, should it be from notes, audio, video, demos, books, problem solutions, examples, whatnot. So, where all the contents can come. What support system should be there in order to deliver? The delivery can be, something like this, which we are doing right now. Or the delivery could be with the help of videos, or delivery could be with the help of classroom teaching, or delivery could be with the help of certain collaboration tools. So so how do we do that? So can it be customized? Can it be more flexible so that anytime, anywhere, and using any device, the student can learn? And then consumption, at what rate the student wants to consume. How does he want to consume? So that is something which the student will have to look at. And what is the kind of assessment? How do you want to do the assessments? So it is so when you start splitting the whole gamut of the learning system, then you start realizing that there are quite a few things, quite a few components, and then can I look at each of these components independently? So then when you start looking at from that point of view, then you start realizing that there is a lot that can be done. Start looking from that. So basically, what we need to do is, or what we need to do, or what we need to build is what is called as an integrated digital learning experience, ecosystem, which is used through, which can be built using certain collaboration tools. And it is important that, a lot of things should happen through collaboration and co-creation. And we should have blended learning, asynchronous and synchronous learning. And, of course, the whole way of, the new normal would be the classroom teaching is going to change. I'm not saying that it will cease to exist, it will exist, but it will come back with a big bang. It will come back with a new, way of looking at things. So please keep an eye on it. The classroom teaching is going to be back, but with a bang. So it will be very different. So, it is better that we start adapting. It is better that we start thinking about it. And it is better that, we start, working towards it right now, so that, we won't be left behind. Otherwise, there are a lot of foreign universities, which are, I've heard, they are taking places around in and around Bangalore. And, a lot of foreign universities are going to come up. And then we are supposed to be competing with them. So then let's not be left behind. So now, coronavirus is accelerating our digital strategy formulation in all businesses, including the education system. So the advantage that coronavirus, with whatever challenges it has given, it is also giving us an opportunity to look at things in a slightly different way. So let us look at it in a slightly different way, and then see how we should have our digital strategy as far as an education system is concerned. So we need to transform digitally. The transformations are going to be difficult. The transformations are always painful, but they are worth. So if you look at this particular example, a pupa will have, in order for it to get converted into a butterfly, it has to undergo a transformation, and that transformation is very painful. Now, if it doesn't undergo that pain, it will not have the pleasure of flying. So, there was a story where, the pupa was trying to come out, the butterfly was trying to come out of this shell. And then one fellow realized that, it is taking a lot of, pains in order to come out. So he wanted to, release it. So what he did was he cut the shell. And when he cut the shell, the butterfly was not complete. So it could not fly. So it has to undergo that pain. So every transformation have to undergo certain pain. So, it is going to be painful for all of us as well, in order to adapt to the new technology or the new, normal. But, there is no way out. We have to undergo that particular thing. So we need to pivot. We need to change. We need to start looking at more agile approaches. We have to start looking at what are the common platforms. And how do we create a right learning ecosystem using these common platforms? So why don't we look at what are the platforms that are available today? How do we challenge them? How do we start building new platforms? Or how do we make the companies to create new platforms? So those are some of the things that we'll have to start looking at. So when you say digital transformation, it is more than sum of its parts. So the future is not just in technology, but the future is in transcending the technology. So we need to be mindful of this in order to make sure that we get on to doing the right thing. So it's all about digital transformation. So when you say digital transformation, it is important that this transformation should create a right experience for the learner, or creating new experiences and better efficiencies with respect to learning, meaning it has to be an efficient learning ecosystem. So improving in efficiency. And then, of course, it should also create new revenue it should create new revenue models. So, and then adapt to the rapidly changing conditions. So when you create this ecosystem, it is important for us to actually build something, where we should be able to, flexibly give the right kind of an, experience for different people, because experience is personal, experience is contextual. So when the experience is personal and the experience is contextual, and when you talk about an experience, experience is more emotional, right? So now you need to design for emotions. So you need to build an emotional system, meaning which can adapt to your emotions. So that is what is going to be a key. And then you have to start thinking about, for your transformation projects, that is your transformation project, which is your education system, which is going to sooner or later is going to be adapting a lot of digital technologies, and it will be a combination of your classroom and the digital world, or cyber physical world that we are talking about. It is both physical world as well as the cyber world connected together. Right, so that is what we are talking about. So the cyber physical world is what need to be created in order to create the right learning experiences or the right ecosystem. So that is what is going to be a key, and that is what we need to be building. So now let me just briefly talk about what is digital transformation. So a digital transformation is a change associated with application of digital technology. Now, when you talk about technology, it's all digital. Okay, so whether you like it or not, everything is digital. And then when you use a word technology, it is always digital. And then applying that to all aspects of human society. That is what the Wikipedia talks about. So what it means, digital transformation. When you say digital transformation, it is new approaches to innovation. So, you want to innovate the way the learning is done today, or you have to innovate the way you deliver your contents, right? So, a new approach, a new way of doing things, right? So that is what is going to be critical. And then, using digital technology in the sense like, you use any technology, it could be any device, it could be IoTs, variables, any technology, using any of these, applying any of these new technologies to all aspects of human society, which means all generations, all industries. So that is how you should be really looking at, right? So that is what is digital transformation. Now, the challenges for digital transformation. What are the challenges for digital transformation? The challenges of digital transformations are that, there are too many things. There are too many technologies, and the leaders are overwhelmed with the kind of technologies that are available today. And things are changing very fast. There's too much and too fast. A lot of things are changing every day. Every day you open, you start looking at or reading certain new technologies. You find a new technology every day that is coming. And then also there is a pressure from customers. So the learners, the students are also changing. The learners are also changing. And every year, you get students of different type. So, there is a pressure from customers or the students. No, for you, the customers are your students. And, the shiny objects, that is just because somebody is using Zoom, I want to use Zoom, so these become shiny objects. So what we are trying to do is, we are trying to adapt what somebody else is doing, without realizing whether that is the right thing for us or not. So it is important. Maybe yes, that could be a right thing, but to what extent it is going to be very helpful to us. So unless we start looking at it, start understanding what are those challenges, we may not be able to have a right digital transformation. So you need to be mindful about what you're doing. It's like your mindful meditation. When you talk about mindful meditation, it's all about the awareness. And when you talk about awareness, you are trying to be aware of what is inside and what is outside and what is beyond, right? So it's all about the awareness. So when you talk about mindful principles for technology, you try to see the same thing. You are mindful. If you have done mindful meditation, I'm sure you will be able to adapt to here also. So here also, what is important is, start looking at what is within you, in the sense what is already existing as far as the digital systems are concerned. What is existing in the institute, right? and what is easily available and what is beyond you. So have mindful about all those things. Now, you need to be mindful about all these things. And then most important is, you need to cut through the noise. So when I say cutting through the noise, what it means is, avoid those shiny objects. Just because somebody else has done, just because some other college has done, it is not necessary for us to adapt unless we think it is the right thing for us. So cut through the noise and focus on the student needs. So you need to focus on what the customer or the student is looking for. And then there is already a system that is existing, so what are the existing systems that are available with us? So look at your landscape. So what systems, we might already have certain things, so how do we use that? How do we use the existing things? And then how do we connect these physical things into a cyber, the technology? So in other words, how do we create what is called as a cyber physical system? So try and start looking from that point of view. So when you start looking from that point of view, you also will start understanding, what kind of ecosystem that is already there, and then, what ecosystem need to be built. So understand and have a blueprint of what is currently existing, and then based on what is existing, create a vision, and then keep doing this. So keep evolving. So that is how, you need to start looking at when it comes to a digital transformation of your education system. So it's a mindful approach. Taking a mindful approach to digital transformation will empower your business to cut through the noise, serve your customers, and thrive in a rapidly changing digital world. So that is what is important. So I'll pause for a minute. And if there are any questions, let me take them and then get on to this.
Participants, if you have any questions in the context of whatever has been covered so far, please ask questions.
Yeah, there are no questions. Let me, give you this problem. Okay, the problem is this. That is, there are 3 light bulbs in your room. And for some reason, the switches are located in the basement of the ground floor. The switches are on the ground floor. You have these 3 switches and the 3 bulbs. So these switches are situated on the ground floor and they are not labeled. So what has happened is this is on the first floor and this is on the ground floor. So that is switches are on the ground floor, the bulbs are on the first floor. Okay. Now you would prefer to minimize the number of times you have to use the stairs. So you want to minimize the number of times you want to use the stairs. The question is, how many trips do you have to make into the basement to figure out which switch works for which light? So you have to find out which switch, which of this works for which bulb. And you have to reduce the number of times you use the stairs because you can't see the bulbs. Okay. For the record, all lights work and each switch will affect only one light bulb. And all the light bulbs are turned off when you start. So now my question is, what is the minimum number of trips that you have to make? I hope you got the question. So please let me know the answers. Any answers, please, because it should not take so much time.
2.
2. 2. Any other answer? Any other answer other than 2?
It can be 1 also, sir.
Huh?
1.
1. Yeah, please tell me how 1.
Sir, if we switch on one, a single button, so
Mhm.
single light will glow actually.
Okay.
So initially, what you can do, you can switch on that one particular button and
Mhm.
allow it to glow for some time. So the bulb will become a bit heated. It will get heated,
Correct.
and then switch it off. Then go with the next bulb,
Okay.
and then go upstairs and check out to
Mhm.
which that bulb belongs. So
Right.
actually, you in a single trip, you got information about the two bulbs, 3 switches and that particular bulbs, and the remaining one is the third button.
Correct.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you. So what happens is, what happened here was, people who said 2, there's nothing wrong with that. The reason is because, the way the question was asked, it is the way the question was asked. So what happens is, because of the way the question is asked, we get into certain answers without thinking further. Just because I started asking, is there any other answer? So then we came up with another answer. Okay. But otherwise, we always think in a certain way, and then that is based on the way the question is asked. So what is important here is to understand the way the question is answered, question is asked. So the way the question is asked, the question is, when you say the question is asked, the question has already been framed in a certain way. So now, we try to look at that framed question and then try to get a solution for that framed question. We don't try to look at, is there any other thing that we are missing? Like, for example, here the question was, how many trips do you have to make into the basement to figure out which switch works for which light? So this how many trips, that actually made you start thinking about the number of trips without really realizing as to, is there anything that was missing? So it's always a question, the way the question is asked, the solutions would be there. So now, it is important for us to see if this question can be reframed, right? So many a times, we'll have to start asking a question as to, is there anything missing in the problem statement? Are there anything that we are not considering? Is there anything outside of the current frame? So we'll have to change the frame. So basically, the question is framed in a certain way. Can we change that frame? So now, here when we started when I started pushing you for, other answers, then we started thinking about, is there anything that was missing, or, is there anything that can be done? So then, being being engineers, we all know that, yes, by switching on the bulb, it gets heated. So, then we started thinking from that point of view, right? So basically what happens is, we have to start, instead of just, giving an answer based on what is already framed, we'll have to start reframing it. Can we reframe the question, or can we start looking at, what is not being already stated? Is there anything that is not being stated? So that is how we'll have to start thinking about the problem. So I have stated that, innovation in the problem domain, we are good at solving a problem, but we are not good at framing the problem. Okay, so, there is one thing which is grossly missing in our curriculum is framing of a problem. We don't teach people how to frame a problem. We only teach how to solve a problem. So now, with the new kind of an environment or a new kind of system, it is not sufficient just to solve the problem. It is important for us to understand, and see if the problem can be reframed. Or in other words, innovation in the problem domain itself. That is what is going to be critical. Okay. So here also, when we talk about online teaching, we just kind of try to tick mark our own things, like I just mentioned in the beginning of my session. So we actually try to solve our problem. We never try to solve what the student's problem was. So basically, we are trying to see if is there a way to frame a problem? Is there a way to understand the problem? So now why we are talking about it and why I want to say this is, quickly, I want to just cover, this is what Einstein said, not sure if it is Einstein who said or anybody who said, but, what is important is the statement. So what he says is, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I would spend 55 minutes in thinking about the problem and then 5 minutes to solve the problem. Right? So it is all about, spending our time in the problem domain. So design thinking essentially gets you or pushes you into, looking at the problem or re-looking at the problem, rethinking about the problem. So that is what is critical. Let me give you an example. See, there was, presume that you are owner of a building, and you have a lot of tenants, and then you are given, you have office spaces, and then you have several office spaces in your building, and then you have rented it out to certain tenants. And then what has happened is, it's a multi-storied building, and your tenants are coming to you, and then they are saying that the elevator is too slow. So they come to you, and then they start complaining that the elevator is too slow. And also they threaten you that, if the elevator is not repaired, then, they might cancel their leases. So it's all about your business. So then what you do? Then what you do is, you take that question, you take that problem as is. The elevator is too slow. So this is the problem. And then you try to solve that. Now, how do you solve it? You solve that by making the elevator faster. How do you make it faster? You either install a new lift, because it's ultimately your business, or you upgrade the motor. You want to upgrade the motor because you want to have a powerful motor in the lift so that it can go faster. Or, possibly the software is not proper, so you want to improve the algorithm of your lift. So, you try to use certain mechanisms or methods in order to solve that problem. Now, wait a minute, and then, take a step back, and then can you see this problem again? Can you start thinking about the problem again? Can you start looking at, why are people saying that the lift is slow? Is it because the wait time is annoying? Possibly, the elevator is not slow, but, the waiting time. If they have to wait in the lift, wait for the lift or wait in the lift. Now, waiting in the lift and waiting for the lift, if that time is annoying, I think that is the problem, right? So possibly the problem could be something else. The problem is not that the elevator is slow. The problem is the wait is annoying. And if the wait is annoying, then you have a better way to solve that problem. What you can do? Put up mirrors in the lift, within the lift, or play some music. Then they don't feel that it is taking time, because they are looking at themselves, and then they don't feel that it's all relative, right? The theory of relativity. So it's all about relativeness. So relatively, you feel that it's not slow. So now, by reframing the problem, you are in a better position to solve that problem in a much easier way. Or, if it is waiting for the lift outside is annoying, can you install the hand sanitizers outside, so that, before that lift comes, you want to sanitize your hands, so a lot of things can be really thought about. So what I'm trying to say here is, for many times what happens is, we just take the problem as is and try to solve the problem. Now, without realizing whether it is a right problem to solve, is it a right problem to solve, or has the problem been framed properly? If the problem itself is not framed properly, you might have a fantastic solution for a wrong problem. So, you need to look at, are we solving a right problem? Not just, are you solving it right? Yes, you may be solving you may be solving it right, but is that the problem that you are supposed to be solving? So it is exactly like you are climbing the ladder, and then you are feeling that you are progressing by climbing the ladder, and only to realize that the ladder has been ladder is leaning on a wrong wall. So if it is leaning on a wrong wall, you reach a rooftop of some other building. So so it is important to understand whether the ladder is leaning on the right wall or not before you start climbing. So likewise, before you start solving a problem, you have to start looking at whether it is the right problem to solve or not. If it is not a right problem to solve, then reframe the problem. Now, how do you reframe the problem and all that? I'm not getting into the details of that, but it is important for us to start looking at reframing a problem. So what it means is this, that is, as soon as you see the problem, you start solving it. This is what we have been taught in our curriculum. Don't do that. Spend some time, reframe it. There is a possibility of reframing. Is it a right problem to solve? Start looking at it from that point of view. So when you start looking from that point of view, you might realize that yes, there's a better way to solve the problem, right? So you have to reframe. Is there a different way to look at the problem? And most important is, it is not just that, you start looking at, you just spend enough time only in the reframing, but, it is important to see that you are moving forward as well. So it is important for us, to move forward and not, continuously, when we say spend 55 minutes in understanding the problem, it doesn't mean that, you keep on, looking at the problem for 55 minutes only to find out that, you don't have time to solve the problem. And then suddenly, you realize that there is no time, and then you give some shabby answer for that. So that is not what is important. What is important is that you should be continuously moving forward. Are we progressing? Are we climbing the ladder? Right? So that is what is important. So yeah, so it is important to essentially reframe. Yes, sir.
Dr. Deepa Kama, do you want to say something? Or it was just by mistake you interfered? Huri sir, it was by mistake, I think.
Okay.
Sir, you can continue.
Yeah.
Last 5-10 minutes.
Okay. So this Nihal Csikszentmihalyi, is a Hungarian psychologist. What he did was actually he tried to find out, he tried to study the psychology of several people. And, he wanted to find out as to, who are those people who are innovators versus the normal people. So what he found was the innovators are the ones who were re-looking at the problem. So if you see any great innovator, they are the ones who were the ones who were looking at reframing of a problem and re-looking at the problem. So which means that reframing has to be a behavior. So you should start looking at, looking at to see if that is the right problem, or is there a better problem to solve? In the sense, can I reframe it in such a way that we solve a better problem? Of course, giving the same expectations are the goal of the end user is fixed, but only thing is that we are trying to see what is the better path to take. So that is what we need to be really looking at. So that is the behavior. So start looking at it from the behavioral point of view. So it is important to see how do we do this part better. Is there a different way of looking at the problem? That is what is critical to us. So start looking at it, so which means that, why is the elevator slow? When you start looking at it only from this, so we are trying to explore within the frame. So you have to go out of this frame. So when you say breaking of the frame, is speed of the elevator right thing to focus on? So when you start looking at this, you look outside the frame. So break the frame. So when you break the frame and start looking at recreating the frame or reframing, then you might be able to get, there are several examples. Maybe when time permits, I could actually talk on the reframing itself as to how the reframing needs to be done. So it's all about reframing. So what it means is, there is a frame that is given. Is the speed of elevator right thing to focus on? You do an analysis. You analyze that. Why is the elevator slow? And then solve it. Right? So basically, what is important is, this is a continuous process. So don't just, jump into saying that, the elevator is slow. Don't just do that. You have to reframe it. So reframe it, and then whatever reframed, analyze it, and then try to solve it. And then, the solution may not be the possibly a right thing, then quickly pivot. So which means that, try to reframe again. So it's an iterative process. So you may have to get into an iterative process to see if whatever is the goal, that will be achieved. So basically, the learning is going to be goal directed. So when we talk about a goal learning, the learning is going to be goal directed. So when it is goal directed, it is important for us to understand what are the goals and how do we achieve those goals. Not our goals, but the students or the learners' goals. So what are the goals that he or she would like to achieve and how he would like to achieve? And then based on that, how do I frame, what needs to be done? So basically, we can apply design thinking philosophy into this. So understanding what the problem is. So it's all about problem finding. I'm not getting into the details of each of these things. So what is important is spend enough time on problem finding. So if you really look at it, solving of a problem, we already know, but, framing of a problem finding. So spend time here. So what are the user needs? In what context? You need to understand the context in which the user needs are, are being looked at, right? So start looking at it. So that is done through what is called as empathize and define phase of design thinking. And then you get into, ideation, prototyping, and testing, and then get into defining a problem, and then get into a problem solving. Right, so that is how we kind of move or apply. It's when you talk about a design thinking, it's again it's a kind of a toolkit, which will help you to discipline your way of thinking, right? So and then more so it is a mindset. So how do we inculcate that design thinking mindset? That is what is going to be critical for us. So how do we do it? So it's through collaboration. So you need to innovate for a value. So you'll have to always start thinking about, it's always important, one second. It is important for us to understand whether we are innovating or not. So we have to innovate for a value. So what is important is, we need to see, are we really giving a value? Like, whenever I am taking a session, I need to understand if there is a value from that. If there is no value from that, then you cannot expect them or expect anybody to participate in that, right? So it is more about innovating for a value. So how do you innovate for value? It is by collaboration, it is by co-creation, and it is by action. So it is not that you understand the problem and then design the solution and then solve the problem and then deliver the solution. It is not that easy. It has to be an iterative process. So it is continuously understanding the problem and then continuously progressing for a solution. So it's an evolutionary approach. So how do you evolve into a solution? Because the transformation projects are all evolutionary. So how do you, define certain phases and then evolve in every stage or every phase? So that is what is going to be a key. So I think I already have reached 10:30. So I think that is where I want to stop then. So basically start with small little things, low-hanging fruits, and then important thing is that see if you can have what is called as a gamification approach for learning. So try and see if the gamification approach can be adapted. So look at, you could Google for gamification, and then I'm sure you will get a lot of things. And then, gamification approach is one of the approaches by which, you would be able to enhance the learner's experience. So it's all about learning experience design, right? So just get onto that. Let me skip all these things, and then let me thank you for listening to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hudi sir. Participants, if you have any questions, please ask. You can unmute yourself and ask your questions.
Sir, there are no questions. Shall we proceed for vote of thanks?
Okay, sir.
Sure.
Okay. Sure. Yeah, Hudi sir, thank you for the session. You started the session with positive approach towards education. That was really great. It is really a different approach to look at the education system or education. You talked about the evolvement of the industrial process, knowledge-based economy. Of course, you talked about unnecessary power shift from intellect to data or information, that is humanism to dataism. You also discussed the learning transfer mental model. Of course, it was useful. The most important point you mentioned was learning is contextual and personalized, and the importance of the digital transformation. Of course, it was enlightening. There was point that the using new approach to deliver your content is important, and that can be done with mindful meditation, that is awareness, and how it can help different way of looking at the problem. And you provided, of course, relevant problem situations. So it was really enlightening for all of us. And I'm sure all the participants must have got enlightened also. So I sincerely thank you for your wonderful session, enlightening session, sir.
Thank you, sir.